Thanks for logging on. It's good to spend this time with you. Excited to be here in the thick of the fall with you, and excited to get ready for our weekend services together and see what God has for us. If we haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Joe. I'm one of the pastors here, and honestly, if we haven't met before, let's rectify that. Let's go ahead and figure something out. Maybe we can grab a cup of coffee or exchange some messages, but the whole point of a church is certainly not just to perpetuate and share and teach what God has for us, but it's to create a community and create an opportunity for us to connect and help each other grow in our faith. And so we would love to be that and do that with you and for you. So reach out, let us know. One of the things that I'm probably the most excited about with this series that we're getting into here before the holidays start is just this whole concept of what does it mean to hear from God? What does it mean to pursue Him, learn from Him, connect with Him? I've talked with so many people that have so many questions about what's that look like? Should we even try? And so I want this to be an encouraging season for you, that as we continue to explore what it looks like to connect with God, that maybe slowly but surely we would actually begin to experience what it means to hear from God. And so I think one of the staples that's going to take is to make sure we kind of have our distractions set aside. So I'll totally tip my hand toward you on that. Let's make sure that we're kind of settling in and that we're, maybe putting the dishes down in a way that we're putting our phone over here, all that kind of stuff, but that we can actually be ready to hear what God has for us. So it's something we want to do every weekend, but especially as we dig into the topic of hearing from God, let's make sure that we actually have our ears tuned in and we're ready to see what He has for us. Now, I don't know about you, but I love this time of year. I love the holidays as they approach. I love Thanksgiving time. I love the month of November. November is actually my birthday month. So there's just all kinds of things that I love about November. But what are some of those things that keep you going? My guess is that some of you are slightly affected by the weather. And so as things get colder and all the rest, you start kind of getting a little bah humbug-esque and you're not really sure why you put up with the weather. But what are some of the things that you love? What are some of the things that you love about this season that are maybe a little bit deeper than I like to get together for the holidays, or I like to get ready for Christmas as it approaches down the road? What are some of those things that you love? What are some of those things that you can appreciate? I'd love to hear from you. If you send me a message with some of the things that you love about the fall, not only might that not be helpful for someone else, I would love to actually send you a little thank you message and maybe a little gift for reaching out and connecting that way. So would love to hear from you. You can reach out to me through social media, email me, however you can discover how to get a hold of me. I would love to interact with you that way. So, okay, as we kind of get those distractions put aside, as we kind of get ready, let's make sure that we're actually positioned, that we're actually poised to hear from God. All right, let's dive in with everybody else and we'll get things started.
Well, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to Grace. Glad that we get to spend some time together here this weekend. If I haven't had the chance to meet you yet, my name's Todd, one of the pastors here on staff, and I don't know, as we're heading into Thanksgiving, I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful that we get the chance to be together and also to have a place where we can come, gather every week, and explore who Jesus is. It's a really big deal. All right. Well, if this is your first time to Grace, I just want to say welcome. It is a big deal that you're here. Thanks for making Grace a part of your weekend. We actually have a gift for you if it is your first time. You can pick that up in the lobby after service. There's even a team of people there that would love to meet you and talk about how we can get you plugged in and around Grace. All right, so if you could do me a favor, I'm gonna ask that everybody scan that QR code located in front of you. Yes, we're gonna be talking about the weekly, which is a tool to know what's going on in and around Grace, but specifically on the weekly, this week, is our Christmas hub. Believe it or not, Christmas is 4 weekends away. I know. Whew. Breathe. Okay, we got this. All right, we're in this together. But 4 weeks from now, Christmas programs are going to be kicking off here at Grace. And so the Christmas Hub is a one-stop shop to let you know everything that's happening around the Christmas season between now and then, specifically our Christmas program. And so there's a chance as you hop on there and navigate the Christmas Hub, you'll see that you can go ahead, if you're a planner, you can go ahead and get your tickets right now. There are reservable tickets. And then there's also walk-ins. And so if you're like, hey, I'm not quite sure what the plan's gonna be, and as time gets closer, you're gonna be inviting friends, your neighbors, coworkers to come to the program, you can just show up as well, all right? But if you are a planner and you wanna grab your seats ahead of time, you can go ahead and start reserving those tickets now, all right? So feel free, navigate the Christmas Hub, learn about everything that's happening this Christmas season. All right. Another thing that I want to draw your attention to, last week we introduced you to the Hope Project. A Hope Project is a way that we as a church want to come around our urban city partners here in the Akron area. And this is a chance for us to serve our community and those in need. And so out in the lobbies, you will see the Hope Project displays. I encourage you to walk over there, check out the different tags, take one of those items if you want to serve this way, and you can begin bringing those items back over the next handful of weeks. In fact, we ask that those items be returned by December 8th, and so you can grab a ticket this weekend and even bring the item back next. All right, so be sure to check out those displays before you leave here today. All right, well, we've got a great service in store for us this weekend. Pastor Josiah is with us. He's going to be continuing our conversation in the series that we've been in called Hearing from God. But before that, the band's going to kick us off. So if you're willing and able, let's go ahead and stand up together as they lead.
All right. Hey, it's great to see you guys. I hope you're ready. We're going to warm up this place. We're going to sing a few songs together. Ready? Here we go. I was searching so far and wide, so worn down from the things I've tried, and nothing came close to you, Lord. Tried my best to make my own way, scared to death, running from my shame. Oh, but you call me yours, all the same. So you said it's finished, oh Lord, you meant it. Oh, when I said I'm yours, God, I don't regret it.
Now
me broken and death claimed my name. You carried the cross and rose from the grave. Death is defeated and you're with me now. So here's all my heart, Lord, I lay it all down. Sin made me broken and death claimed my name. Carried the cross and rose from the grave. Death is defeated and you're with me now. So I sing hallelujah. One day I'll be with you face to face, surrounded by all your love, amazing grace. Oh, I can't imagine and I can't wait. I
Man, would you guys pray with me? Oh, God, thank you so much. That, man, you are a God that is always there, that is always present. That in the worst of times, the best of times, we can rely on you, trust in you, come to you. So God, help us to see that side of you, to see you as a God that loves us so much and that has never left our side. Thank you so much. We pray this in your name. Amen. Thanks so much for singing with us. You guys can go ahead and take a seat.
Yo, what's up, everybody? How you doing? Good? Doing all right? All right. Well, it's good to see you all. If we've never met before, my name is Josiah. I'm the young adults pastor here at the church. Actually, I didn't want to take a second and say it's been cool. I know we're like in the fall time, winter time. I last night went to go see Gladiator 2. It's awesome, in case you were wondering. Anyways. But we saw it super late, and I was walking in the movie theater, and it's the freezing rain thing happened. You know, I forgot about this. I forgot that this is a feeling that happens, the freezing rain. Anyways, I was remembering it was getting cold. All that to say, we're kind of settling into some new routines, the fall, winter, all that kind of stuff. And I keep meeting new young adults around our church. And so if you are between the ages of 18 to 29-ish, and you are not connected with our young adult ministry collective, I would love to be able to meet you and get you connected in that kind of a way. I talk to guys all the time that they feel like they're too young or they're too old or I'm single, I'm married, or like whatever. You just haven't met your people yet. And so if there's a way that I can get you connected and plugged in on Thursday nights, I would love to be able to do that. But we are on the second week of a series of conversations we started last week called Hearing from God. If you were here last week, Pastor Joe Caruso, the GOAT, kicked us off by talking about really prayer. We've really been talking about prayer. And Joe's whole premise, if I could paraphrase it and try and put it into a sentence, was this: to have a healthy relationship with God, you first need to see God as a loving Father. To have a healthy relationship with God, God can't just be king. He can't just be the creator. Yes, he is all those things. But first and foremost, the way that Jesus describes God and wants us to interact with God is as a loving Father. And so if you missed last week, I would really encourage you, if you scan the little QR code on the chair, you can catch up on that, and that would really kind of help set a good foundation for what we're going to talk about today. I want to pick up that conversation, and I want to talk about just practically, what does it look like to have a healthy prayer life? Like, what does it look like to connect with God that way in a really meaningful way? So if you have a Bible or you got a phone or you got a Kindle Fire for some reason, or I don't know, whatever, if you can find Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6. This is written by the Apostle Paul to a group of early followers of Jesus. And Paul is trying to unpack, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? What does that actually look like? And this conversation, I really want to zoom in on one verse. One verse. We're going to read the context around it, all that, but I really want to zoom in on this one verse, and it's this one right here. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 18. This is what Paul says: pray in the Spirit at all times and on every occasion. Pray in the Spirit at all times and on every occasion. And if you got like a highlighter, or you want to, put something on Instagram or whatever, this is probably the verse to be able to do that. Here's the main idea that Paul tries to get across really all throughout the Bible. Prayer is the number one way to invite God into your life. Prayer is the number one way to invite God into your life. The health of your relationship with God and the health of your prayer life are completely linked and completely matched. And that's why the Bible is always talking about the importance of talking to God. I'm going to give some rapid fire verses. They're going to throw them on the screen and you're probably not going to be able to read them. But if you look out throughout the Bible, there's these lines that they drop constantly. James chapter 5 says, if anyone is among you in trouble, let them pray. Matthew chapter 23, Jesus says, watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. Romans chapter 12 says, anyone is among you in trouble, let them pray. Matthew chapter 23, Jesus says, watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. Romans chapter 12 says, be joyful in hope, patient in affliction or trouble, faithful in prayer. Colossians chapter 4 says, devote yourself to prayer. But here's my personal favorite. Philippians chapter 4 says, don't worry about anything. I worry about a lot of things, so I'm already F on this verse. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Prayer is how we invite God into the depths of our lives, and the health of our prayer life and the health of our relationship with God are interconnected in a way that you cannot detach. But I want everyone, just do me a favor, if you can. I want everybody just to imagine someone that's praying. So try and just get a picture in your head of someone who they're praying, they're doing it all right. God's like, yes, that is it. They're doing it right. Get that, not you, but somebody else, an image of somebody praying. Everybody got that in your head? Okay. If I were to survey the room and ask you to describe what that person looks like and what are they doing, I bet you we would hear things like this. So I bet you most of us in this room imagine someone who had their eyes closed and their hands folded, and maybe they were like, kneeling by a bedside or something like that. Others of us imagined someone that was very Instagrammable, very Instagrammable. The latte, Starbucks released all their Christmas drinks, if you didn't know, and I'm a big fan, so I'll accept gift cards. But they got the latte right there, and their hands are out like this, and there's like a highlighter by their Bible, and and they put that. So some of us imagined that. Others of us maybe imagined somebody going to like a holy place. So you go to, like a Catholic church, and there's the stained glass windows and the statue of Jesus. I always think of in Spider-Man 3, Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man 3, there's this scene where Venom, Eddie Brock, gets down on his knees and says, God, please kill Peter Parker. So it's like some of us imagine something like that. Now, all of those images, except the Venom one, all of those other images are good and healthy and can be helpful, and you'll find many of them in the Bible. But here's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of those images limiting what God actually desires. I'm afraid that when we think that that's what prayer is and that's what it's supposed to look like, it's putting a cap on what God is actually out for. Because think of the closest relationships in your life. So the closest relationship in my life is my wife, my best friend in the world. My other close friends, my family, they're also all close to me. I don't talk to any of those people like that. I don't talk to any of those people formally. There's not a certain posture that I have to, Sometimes formality can communicate respect, but actually a lot of the time formality communicates distance. I'm afraid of this person. I don't know how they're going to respond. And so I interact with them in an incredibly formal way. Not all the time, but sometimes because I'm not actually connected to them. God is supposed to be the closest relationship that we have. And the closest people in my life are the people that I talk to the most constantly, and they're the people that I talk to the most freely. And that's what Paul is getting at in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 18. We can put it back on the screen. Pray in the Spirit at all times and on every occasion. When does it say to pray? At all times. About what does it say to pray? Literally everything, every single occasion. Prayer is meant to be this constant, never-ending conversation with God, this constant connection with Jesus. God is actually less interested in these perfect 20 minutes going super well, and he's way more interested in this constant open dialogue. God's actually not really interested in the types of words that you use when you talk to him. He's not worried that you say everything right or that, all the theology is perfect, or that's not really what he's worried about. What he's more worried about as a loving father is that his kid is connecting with him in a real and meaningful way. Growing up, I have a big family, and so when I would get home growing up, I had no idea what I would be walking into. But I remember by the time I got my license, when I was 16, I would get home later than anybody else. And so around 11, 12 o'clock, whatever, I'd get home at my house, and normally the only other person that was still awake when I got home was my dad. And my dad, if you were to find my dad on any given day at 12 o'clock at night, he is probably watching some random movie, like Kong versus Godzilla is definitely his energy, Transformers 3, Dark of the Moon. These are a few of my dad's favorite films. So that's his energy. And so I would always walk in on him watching some random movie on the Sci-Fi Channel, that kind of a thing. And I remember there was this phase where I would drive home and I had to walk past where the TV was to get to my bedroom. And my dad didn't always know that I had come home. And I would walk by, and sometimes I would just hear my dad talking. And I would think, well, he is getting up there, so maybe so, and it happened enough times that finally one day I stopped and I listened to what my dad was saying, and I realized my dad, on the commercial breaks of the movies, would just talk to God. And he would be talking to God about, he has a pretty stressful job, so he'd just be talking to God about whatever that he was stressed about. And I remember one time I walked in on him, and he was like, oh, like it's an awkward exchange. But my dad taught me in that moment, he said, Josiah, I just never hang up the phone on God. My prayer life is not a dear God starting place, amen ending place. My prayer life is this constant conversation when I'm in the car, when I'm at work, when I get food, whatever. I just continue to talk to God at all times about everything. And I think that that's more of an example of what the Bible's talking about than what we've constructed in like Western traditional culture. So here's what I want to look at today. I want to look at two areas of our lives where we tend not to invite God into, and two areas of our lives that we don't really know how to talk to God about. And I want to talk about how to invite God into those spaces, and maybe some of the insecurities that we might have around that, or some of the reasons that we might not invite God into those spaces. So the first one is a little easier, and the second one's a little more complex. So we're going to start with the first one. The first area of our life that we don't tend to invite God into, even though it's deeply important, is the daily grind of our life. The daily grind. Here's what I mean. If you were to take all your thoughts, the things that you think about, the things that actually stress you out, the things that you actually get upset about or happy about or anxious about or whatever about. If we were to just capture all those thoughts and survey them, I bet you 98% of those thoughts are not spiritual thoughts whatsoever. I bet you 98% of the things that you're worried about are logistical, or they have something to do with work. They have something to do with that family member. They have something to do with if you're in a relationship, the relationship, or kids, or the car, or like what. They're just random logistical things. And we tend not to know how to invite God into these spaces. I started following Jesus when I was in high school, so right around the same time when my dad taught me that lesson. And before my dad explained that to me, here's how I used to think about my relationship with God. I used to think that there were some spaces where God was present, and then there were other spaces where he wasn't present, and it was my job to come into the spaces where he was present and get fed or get filled or go find ammo for Call of Duty or fill up the car gas tank or charge the phone or whatever analogy you want to use. I want to fill up so that when I go into the other 6 days of the week or 5 days of the week or whatever, when I go into these other spaces, I can pour myself out. And if I pour myself out and I don't run out of gas, I had properly filled up. And what I really thought was this: God wants me to live my life for God. He wants me to live my life for God. So I'm doing things on God's behalf. I'm proving my devotion to him based on how I survive in these other environments. And so what I thought was Bible, like reading the Bible or prayer or especially church, this was the gas station. And then I hit the road with the rest of my life. But what I didn't realize was that God doesn't want me to live life for him. God wants me to live life with him. He doesn't want me to have spaces that are holy spaces where he's involved and then go survive the rest of the day. He wants me to do things with him all the time. What I didn't realize was God was just as close to me when I was just out with my friends at a random football game as he was when the band was absolutely kicking butt, doing an awesome job. I didn't realize that when I was in a fight with someone or an argument with someone, there was incredible tension, that God was standing next to me in those moments just as closely as he was in these other spaces. I just want to ask, just be honest with yourself for a second. If you're being completely honest, I know it's easy to be like, God is amongst us, like the force. I know it's easy to say that, but if you're being completely honest, are there places and spaces in your life or situations in your life where you feel like God isn't really there to the same degree that he is in another space? Are there relationships that you have a lot of tension in? And so when you're in that person's house or you're talking to that manager or whatever, it just feels like this is, God's not really here. I got to do stuff on behalf of him. Are there some spaces where it feels like God is super present and other spaces where God super isn't? And what I realized what I was doing is I was compartmentalizing my relationship with God. I was compartmentalizing. In the book of Joshua, God calls his people to go into enemy territory. And this was going to be a space where these people are doing, this culture was doing these horrible things, and God calls them out. And here's what God tells them to do. God says, he looks at Joshua and says, Joshua, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. The Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. If God lives inside of me, then that means wherever I go is a holy space. Wherever I go, God is standing next to me at that time. I just don't sense him, and I just don't feel him, but that doesn't mean that he isn't actually there. Now, last week, I was talking to Joe from last week, and Joe was saying, when he was talking to Lobby, he was getting a lot of conversations, but one of the most constant questions that he was getting last week that we want to talk about this week, where people were asking him, Joe, I've tried praying, I've tried talking to God, I just don't feel anything. I just don't feel anything. Have you ever felt that way? Like I tried talking to God, I tried doing the thing. Am I doing something wrong? Is there something wrong with me? Is there a reason that God's not super interested in talking to me? And I was thinking about that for a while because I feel that way all the time. I am first and foremost a feeler. And so my emotions definitely, if I'm not careful, my emotions definitely get to dictate reality at times. And so there's been many times where I feel like God's not with me. I was thinking about that for a little bit. And I actually started thinking about the other relationships in my life, the other close relationships in my life. So yesterday, it just so happened that I had the day off work, and Sarah, my wife, also got most of the day off work. And so we just got to hang out the whole day. And yesterday was like, I don't know, like if you've ever had days like this, yesterday was like a butterflies day. Like I just kept looking at her, I'm like, you are so beautiful. And I meant it, I don't know what happened to me. I used to be a lot more hardcore. Now I'm just simping it, I don't know what happened. But like I'd be with her, I'm like, can I hold your hand? It was a butterflies day. And so we went to the movies. We got to have a lot of conversations. She likes, looking at Christmas stuff in the store. We got to do all this kind of stuff together. And it was like a peak day. Like I'm going to remember that for a really long time. But then I started thinking to myself, what if the only times I talked to Sarah were on butterfly days? What if the only time I really engaged, when I thought, man, our relationship's in a good spot, the only time where I really talked to her were on butterfly days? Well, what would happen? Well, really, really quickly, what would happen is our relationship would start to decline. Because 95% of the time, you're not on a high, you're not on the low, you're just right in the middle. So our relationship would start to decline, and eventually our relationship would cease to exist whatsoever. Because the health of a relationship is not determined by the highs or the lows. The health of a relationship is determined by the consistency of everything that happens in the middle. Because most of our life is in the middle. Here's what I'm worried about, if I'm just being real. I'm worried that a lot of us, when it comes to our relationship with God, we're more interested in the butterflies than we are the person of Jesus himself. We're more interested in how God makes us feel than actually being with God. And I get it. Like I struggle with this all the time. But we'll think of things like this. We'll be like, well, I tried talking to God and I didn't feel a sense of peace. Or I had this situation go on, but, the situation continued to exist. And we won't say this and we won't do this on purpose, but what will happen is because the butterflies and the feelings and the transcendence or whatever you want to call it, because that thing didn't click into gear, we slowly stop trying, we slowly stop talking, and our relationship deteriorates altogether. And you get to a place where you're like, man, I don't feel close to God whatsoever. Well, that's the reason. The reason is because the health of your relationship is not determined by the highs. It's not determined by the lows. It's determined by everything in between. Let me flip it. What does God think about you? Well, God's not just interested in your highs and he's not just interested in your lows. He's interested in you. God is not saying, pray to me so that you can be more obedient, or pray to me so that you can be more productive. This is what Joe talked about last week. God is saying to you, I just want you. all day, every day, no matter what the situation is, 24 hours a day. I just want to have this constant open dialogue. I want to be your father, and I want you to be my son, you be my daughter, you be my kid. And so here's the first challenge off the bat. The vast majority of our days is just bland. Do you know how to invite God into the midst of it all throughout the day? When you get that text or that passive-aggressive email from that person, and you know when you get a text and you look at your phone and the shot of anxiety shoots through your system, it's like, what's your first response? Well, here's my first response. When I get that text that reminds me that, oh yeah, that person hates my guts, forgot about that. When I get that text, my first response is to look at Instagram, right? And I start scrolling through Instagram and I find something mindless, and eventually that whatever dopamine thing kicks into gear, and I suppress my feelings. Well, what if my instinct instead was to say to God, there is something toxic in my own soul that this thing is bringing up. That's why I'm getting mad. God, can you help me with this situation? When you look at your bank account, which and the number is nowhere in the ballpark of where you want it to be, what if your first response is, God, let me trust you? Will you provide for me instead? Or, God, I'm mad. I feel like I deserve more than this. What have you just talked to about when that family member offends you? We're going to go into Thanksgiving, and I hear word on the street is not everyone loves everyone they have to eat Thanksgiving with. It's a rumor out there. When you go to Thanksgiving and that person says that condescending thing that you're already talking to your siblings about, I can't. Oh, mom's gonna. Like when they say that thing. What if your response is, God, help me with this situation? You get what I'm saying? No matter the situation, no matter how mundane, no matter how stupid, no matter how small, if it means something to you, it means something to God. And what if we got in the regular rhythm of inviting God into this space? Or is every moment of every day with God, or is there a compartmentalization taking place? Here, I'm just trying to be super practical. Let me give you two practical things. Quick tips when it comes to prayer life. What if instead of trying to pray for an hour, what if you try not to go an hour without praying? What if instead of trying to pray for an hour, have this magical moment? That's awesome if you can have that. But what if instead of making that your goal, what if you tried to never go an hour without praying, these tiny little prayers? God, help me with this. Oh, I'm super frustrated about this. I don't know what to think about that. What if that was your new rhythm? Second one, when the feeling of anxiety strikes, make prayer your instinct. When the feeling of anxiety strikes, instead of the social media thing, or instead of, all of us have these weird anxious reactions. Some of us are like, I don't have anxiety, but then you get angry all the time. I'm like, that's an anxious response, is what your therapist would tell you. But I don't need therapy. Anyways, what if however you tend to respond to the things that make you mad, what if the first response is, God, will you help me in this? Will you meet me in the midst of this? So that's the first area. There's a second major area of our life, though, that we don't tend to invite God into. And this one gets a little bit deeper and a little bit more personal. And it's this right here. We tend not to invite God into our struggle. We tend not to invite God into the struggle. And that's actually one of that is the number one place when we need to invite God into. If you go back to Ephesians chapter 6, I want to put this verse in its full context. Paul is actually talking about something else entirely, and I want to look at what he's talking about and then see why this comes up. So Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, Paul says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on every piece of God's armor so that you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of trouble. Then after the battle, you will still be standing firm." Paul's writing to a group of early Christians, and he's writing about something that, I'll be honest, us American secular people, we don't think about this much, and we don't really have many categories for this. Paul is saying this right off the bat. He says, guys, you can't forget, there is a spiritual battle for your mind. There's a spiritual battle for your mind. If you look at verse 13, Paul talks about some character called the enemy. And this enemy is often what people mean when they say the devil. And the enemy shows up all throughout the Bible. Sometimes in the beginning of the Bible, he's depicted as a snake. At the end, he's depicted as a dragon. In there, he's depicted as a lion. Like he's depicted all throughout, but all of these images are making the same point. There's an enemy out there, and he's a predator, and he's after your mind, and he's after your heart. He's out to get you, and he's after your mind, and he's after your heart. Now, to be clear, the Bible does not portray the devil as Lil Nas X with a pitchfork and the horns. Like that's cartoon stuff. That's not what he's talking about. Instead, think of it like this. The enemy is largely this immaterial and invisible intelligence who is constantly trying to transmit lies into your mind. There's an enemy. His weapon of choice is lies, because he's not after your body and he's not after your situation. He's after your mind and he's after your heart. And we don't sense him, and especially in the West, we don't even know that he's there because, to quote Kaiser Soze, the greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing the world that he doesn't exist. As long as we don't realize that he's there, we'll fall for his trap over and over again, constantly transmitting lies. I often think of the enemy as like a radio transmitter that's constantly broadcasting this frequency. And sometimes our minds pick it up and sometimes they don't. Have you ever been having a day that's like the best day ever? Things are going really great. And then out of nowhere, you get bombarded with intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts that you don't know what to do with, that make you super anxious or make you super angry or make you whatever it is you get, and you don't know where they come from. Have you ever been having a really bad day? And, everybody has bad days and work wasn't going great or whatever, but then your thoughts turn very depressive or they even turn suicidal. Where you're like driving on the highway and you're like, all I have to do is turn the wheel. Like out of nowhere, there's these thoughts that start entering into your mind. Have you ever been with a person or scrolling on your phone or, whatever, and then all of a sudden, nothing leads up to this, but your thoughts turn like perverted, and they turn sexual, and it gets really weird really fast, and you don't know where these thoughts are even coming from? Have you ever had a friend come and give you great news? Hey, I just got engaged, we're getting married. And at first you're really happy, but as soon as you get in the car and you start driving away, you think, wait a second, why am I not getting married? Why is my life going in the wrong direction? Listen, anxiety, distractions, jealousy, insecurity, fear, anger, depression, sometimes those are just us being selfish. I don't think that the devil doesn't have to help us be selfish. We're really good at that. But the Bible teaches that oftentimes, perhaps far more frequently than we think, those thoughts are strategic and they're planted. They're strategic and they're planted. We are constantly being transmitted lies that are not our own thoughts. They're not coming from within us, but are being planted into our mind that are telling us lies about God, lies about ourselves, lies about others, and lies about reality. And yes, of course, there's a physical and a hormonal and a neurological component to all this, but Paul is reminding us, do not forget, the struggle is fundamentally spiritual. All these things are overlapping, yes, but it's fundamentally spiritual and it's fundamentally metaphysical. Our struggle is not just against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of evil. However, if you have Jesus, you don't need to be afraid of this enemy. Let's continue, verse 14. Stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all of these, hold up the shield of faith to stop the fiery arrows of the evil one. That's lies. Pick up faith to block the lies that are coming in. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. And then Paul drops this line, pray in the Spirit at all times and on every occasion. Pray in the Spirit at all times and on every occasion. Here's what he's saying. If lies are how the enemy infiltrates your mind, prayer is how Jesus wins back your heart. The number one solution against the struggle that we feel every day is prayer, because the number one defeater of that struggle and of that evil is Jesus, and prayer is how we invite him in. However, if prayer is not a constant part of your life, lies will be. If prayer is not a constant part of your life, lies will be. And here's a tricky thing about lies. You can't detect them. So there are many of us in this room, probably most of us in this room, probably to a degree all of us in this room, that are building our lives on things that are not true, that are fundamentally false. We don't feel any pain for it. We don't feel any flack for it, but they will build up and eventually the bridge will collapse. If prayer is not a constant part of your life, lies will be. When I was in high school, my best friend, Kyle, he asked me if I would go on a weekend trip with him and his family. And I was like, sure, that sounds great. And so we get in the car and we're on this weekend trip. But as we're driving, Kyle had this girlfriend, and she was sweet or whatever. But I was not a fan of their relationship. His girlfriend's name was Hannah, and they were just like obnoxious, you know? There was nothing wrong with what was going on. They had one of those relationships where they never talked in person, they just texted. I'm like, what kind of relationship is this, you know? And so we're in the car driving to the vacation spot, and the whole time I'm trying to talk to Kyle, like just trying to hang out, whatever, and he's just texting Hannah. I'm like, dude, oh. And eventually I realized what happened is like, he definitely wanted to bring Hannah on the trip, but his parents vetoed that, and so he got the next best thing, you know? And so we're just sitting driving there, and I got sick of him texting this girl. So eventually, I came up with a plan. And to this day, I think this is the best prank I've ever pulled in my life. Kyle, we got to a gas station, and Kyle went inside to the gas station, but he left his phone in the car. And so I picked up his phone, and I opened Hannah's contact, and I changed her number to my number so that everything I texted said it was from Hannah. And I thought this was going to be the greatest thing in the world. And then I blocked Hannah, so she was out of the picture. And so we start driving again, and me and Kyle are just flirting it up. So we're driving, and he's like, hey, smiley face. I'm like, hey, smiley face. I'm like, this is the most affection I've ever got from Kyle in my life. I'm like, this feels kind of nice. I'm not going to lie. I wish someone loved me like this all the time. And so we're just flirting it up. And about a day goes by of us flirting it up. And finally, it's getting later in the night. And I never told him. And and eventually I was kind of getting tired of this routine. I'm like, let's shake it up. I'm like, I want to get in a fight with Kyle. Like, I want to get in an argument and see how like an argument would go. And so I just had to come up with some kind of argument. And so it gets to nighttime. And he sends his final text to Hannah for the night, Hannah, quote unquote. And he says, good night, sweetheart. I'm thinking, oh, we're on sweetheart terms. Like, this is going, you're way further in this relationship than I thought you were. And so I thought, what do I do with the text sweetheart? Like, how do I turn this into a fight? And so I just started thinking, I'm like, okay, I'll just type something ridiculous. And I go, sweetheart, question mark, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point. And he goes, yeah? And I go, sweetheart is what my Uncle Bo used to call me. And he's like, okay. And I go, before Uncle Bo died. That was my big idea. And so immediately Kyle looks over at me, Josiah, the real person, and goes, bro, I just messed up. I need some advice. And I'm like, come here, I'm here to talk. And so he looks at me and says, I just referenced Uncle Bo, and apparently Uncle Bo died. And I was like, oh, it's no big deal, bro. Just tell him that you don't remember her ever telling you about that. Great idea. So he responds to Hannah and says, I don't remember ever talking about Uncle Bo. And I respond, you don't remember? You don't remember? When we first started dating, I was in tears telling you about Uncle Bo. How can you not remember? And Kyle looks at me, real life Josiah, and goes, bro, I just messed up again. It just got worse. It just got worse. And so I said, why don't you try this one? He's pacing. Like, he is stressed, like sweating. I'm like, why don't you try this one? Why don't you say, oh, yeah. I remember that conversation. I just forgot that his name was Uncle Bo. I just forgot. And so he texts that, and he's like, yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. And so he texts, I forgot his name was Uncle Bo. And I respond, you forgot his name? You forgot his name? I shared with you the song that I wrote for Uncle Bo and played for him at his funeral. Do you not remember that song? The lyrics were, sweet Uncle Bo, sweet, sweet Uncle Bo, why'd you have to go? You know, how could you forget that? And so I just let this fight drag out, not for an hour, not for 2 hours. I let this fight drag out for 2 days. We just kept going back and forth, and he was sweating, and he was pacing, and he was pacing. And so he was freaking out the rest of the trip. Eventually, I told him. He let loose a lot of profanity in my direction. But here's the point of the story. Here's the point of the story. When communication breaks down, so does the relationship. What the devil is fundamentally trying to do is he's trying to get between your relationship with God and speak on God's behalf. All Kyle had to do was actually talk to this girl in person. If he had a relationship with this girl in person, immediately he would figure out the tomfoolery. I'm the devil in this story. Immediately he would figure out what's going on, and he put everything into its proper order. But because he didn't have the ability to talk to her in person, the relationship fell apart, and his anxiety and his anger and his frustration continued to increase. Everybody catch this. This is really important. The enemy's big goal is not to get you to do these big, bad, horrible, terrible things. I think we think sometimes that the devil's trying to turn me into a serial killer. That's actually not his biggest goal. The enemy's biggest goal is just to get you to disconnect from God. If he gets you to disconnect from God, to turn away from God, he wins. That's it. He doesn't really care what you turn into after that. And because prayer is the number one connector to God, the last thing the enemy ever wants you to do is talk directly to God. In Genesis chapter 3, you might know this story. We're told of the story of Adam and Eve. And this is the story where Adam and Eve are the first two human beings. The devil is in the story. He's depicted as the snake, right? And he tempts Adam and Eve to do the one thing that would turn them away from God, which is to eat the forbidden fruit. And this story really is like this archetypal story of how the devil lies to us and how he gets us to turn away from God. If you pay close attention to this story, the first thing the enemy does to Adam and Eve, and the first thing he does to us, is he gets them to doubt God. To doubt God. God doesn't really love you. God doesn't really care about you. God is actually trying to hold you back. Now, here's what's really interesting. If Adam and Eve had simply, at that moment, just gone to God and said, God, we're doubting you. God, we're thinking this thing about you. God, are you really trying to hold me back? If they had just had that one simple conversation with God, God would have been able to shut down the lie, shut down the temptation, and the whole story would have never happened. But they didn't go to God. Why? Well, here's why. When you doubt, and all of us doubt, when you doubt, something else enters into your system, and it's shame and it's fear. There's something about us that thinks, man, if I'm doubting God, God's gonna kick me out of the family or something. If I'm doubting God, I don't have a real faith. God's gonna be so mad at me. There's a shame and there's a fear. I can't bring this to God. I can't doubt with God. I have to fight all the doubt on my own. I have to fight all the doubt on behalf of God. And then I'll present myself back in front of God again and say, God, look how much faith I have. But everybody track me on this. This is really important. Having doubt is not a lack of faith. Hiding doubt is a lack of faith. Having doubt is not the lack of faith. Hiding the doubt is the lack of faith. Listen, some of us are in terrible circumstances right now. If we can keep it real. Some of us right now, you've lost a loved one or you're losing one. The mental health struggle continues to plummet. You feel like God hasn't shown himself to you in any kind of real way that's actually meaningful. That you had a dream that you thought maybe God was leading you towards, that he was promising you that was going to be great and incredible, and that dream fell through. And so you didn't end up with the thing that you thought God was trying to hand to you. Some of us have very real, painful struggles that are happening right now that are bringing very real doubts into your mind, and it makes sense why that's happening. What the devil wants you to believe more than anything is that if you were to be honest about that doubt and honest about your own struggle, that God's gonna get mad and he's gonna kick you out of the family because you don't have enough faith. And so what happens is, just like Kyle turning to me, the one trying to manipulate him, the devil hopes that as he gets you to second guess God, you will turn to anything other than God. Because as long as you turn to anything other than God, he wins. And so what do we turn to? Well, we start venting to the people in our lives, or we start distracting ourselves with social media or Netflix or whatever it is, or we just compress because I'm big and strong, and whatever it is, We turn to anything except God. That's the lie, though. Here's the truth. The truth is, nothing will strengthen your relationship with God more than coming to him in weakness. Nothing strengthens your relationship with God. When you look at God and say, God, I am struggling, I don't have faith, I don't know how to trust you, will you meet me in the midst of this? And Jesus wants us to come to us in our weakness. And those are the most intimate, powerful times I've ever had with God, is when I come to God and I say, God, I have been depressed, unable to get out of bed for months. Why? Why won't you? God, I asked you. I served you. It didn't happen. Why? God, if you're out there, why don't you reveal yourself? And God has never responded in an angry way or a condemning way. He's a loving father. And he looks at his kid with gentleness and compassion and kindness and says, I know this doesn't make sense, but let's do this together. Listen to me, you do not have a father who's going to kick you out or hit you or yell at you because you come to him asking for help. You have a father who's going to embrace you with open arms every single time. But Adam and Eve didn't do this. They didn't do this. Instead, Adam and Eve really did three things, and we do these same three things. Instead of coming to God, they listen to the snake, they grab the fruit, they turn away from God, the relationship starts to malfunction, right? Then Adam and Eve respond after they mess up, after they fail, they believe the lie. They respond in three ways. The first thing that they do is hide from God. So much could have been fixed if after they ate the fruit, they immediately came back to God and were like, God, we're sorry, we really messed up. What do we need to do? They didn't. Instead, they run as far away from God. The second thing that they did is they didn't take responsibility for the thing that they just did. So they start blaming each other. They start blaming other people. They're like, I don't know that this thing was that big of a deal after all. That's the second thing. And then the third thing that they do is they compensate for their mistake. So the Bible tells us that they sew fig leaves together, and basically it's trying to represent, they cover up the shame of the mistake that they've made. They're trying to compensate for the shame of the mistake that they made. Listen, all of us have different stories. All of us are coming from different places. Some of us are followers of Jesus. Some of us aren't. Like, all of us are all over the place, but all of us have something in common. All of us have messed up, and all of us will mess up. All of us have failed, and all of us will fail. It's not an if, it's a when. For many of us, it's when you fall back into pornography, when that relationship blows up, when you lose your temper, when you put something before God and start, corroding the relationship, when you sleep with someone again, when you get drunk again, when you fall back into marijuana, when you believe all the insecurities and start becoming self-destructive. It doesn't matter how spiritually mature you are, quote unquote, you will fall back into the thing. You will fall back into sin. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't struggle with these things. I've been following Jesus for a long time. I don't have these obvious sin in my life. Well, congratulations. Your sin is arrogance. So all of us have ways that internally or externally we are turning away from God and we don't even see them. And when we fail, internally or externally, all of us have exactly the same responses. Some of us hide from God. There are many of us in this room right now that coming into this room was a big deal for you because you think God doesn't even want to talk to you. There's so much shame. You feel like you're on a probation period with God. You got to give him some space so he can cool off and so you can get better. How many of us, when we mess up, you move away from the people that know Jesus and have a relationship with Jesus. You move away from talking to God. You hide from God. Why? Because when you do something embarrassing or when you do some kind of mistake, our first instinct is to. Some of us are hiding from God. Others of us, what we're doing is we're taking responsibility off of ourselves. We're immediately blaming other people, or we're convincing ourselves that it's not that big of a deal. The Bible doesn't really go into detail about sexually that thing. I think it's probably fine. He knows we love each other. That's all good. The Bible doesn't, like, it doesn't technically talk about marijuana. Like, I feel like that's a gray area, you know, and the Bible doesn't, and I don't think it's that big of a deal. Everyone does that thing. What are you doing? You're minimizing the eating of the fruit. Others of us, we go into the blame game to take responsibility off of ourselves, right? And so immediately you launch into, well, if my parents didn't raise me the way they raised me, or if I didn't have the wounds that I had, or if this person didn't do that, then I wouldn't have, and the thing I did isn't even close to what they did. And so, yeah, they said that. So, yeah, I have totally trashed my sister-in-law in front of her whole family, but she deserved it. And the reality is like, listen, no matter how you were raised, and no matter like what's gone, what kind of wounds and all that kind of stuff, every decision you've made is still a decision that you made. You made it. No one put a gun to your head to make that decision. But we immediately shift responsibility. And the last thing that we do is we compensate for the thing that we feel ashamed of. Instead of looking the bad thing dead in the eye and admitting what it actually is, instead you replace it with a good thing. And you're like, well, but it just, this past Wednesday night, I went to, so there's this Bible study, this young adult Bible study that meets on Kent State University. And I love how it meets because it meets right in the middle of the student center where all these like students are passing by and everything. It's super cool because it's like they're talking about Jesus and they're talking really out in the open. And there's people that like don't believe in Jesus that are just walking by, right? So it's super cool. And a lot of these guys in the Bible study, they're newer in their faith, so they're super excited. They're like, Jesus saved my life. And so they were saying all this awesome stuff. And I was sitting there, and I had never been there before. And I'm watching people pass by, and I was the guy that was thinking, shouldn't we be talking a little bit quieter? Like, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. You know, there was a guy that kept looking at us. I'm like, is he going to report us or something? Like, are we going to get in trouble for this? And I realized really quickly that I had a very deep insecurity of my own relationship with Jesus. So I started driving home, and God started convicting me and saying, Josiah, right now, your identity is not entirely coming from me. You're not just trying to win my approval. You definitely want the approval of other people. You want to look a certain way. You want to come across a certain way. And the insecurity and the lack of confidence you have, that's not coming because you don't know how to love yourself. That's coming because you're not embracing my love for you. And so I'm driving home thinking, you know, God's convicting me of these insecurities. You know the first thing I started thinking of? The first thing I said back in my own mind to God was, yeah, that might be true, but, you know, I don't even know that they'd be having this Bible study to begin with without my fearless leadership. The whole reason that they're even meeting here to begin with is because I lead the ministry where they get the courage to. And then I started thinking, well, you know, but I'm really bold when I'm teaching. You know, I'm really brave when I'm teaching. Home turf, like home court advantage in every single, but I'm really brave over there. Well, I did the dishes this morning, so, you know, and immediately what did I do? I started compensating. God's trying to expose something that's evil and dark in my heart, and I start replacing it with all of these other things. Well, we're doing exactly the same thing. Anytime God convicts you, anytime he presses to, you immediately change the subject. Listen, all of us are doing one of these things or a combination of these things when we fall away from God. But do you know what all three of these responses have in common? Can I be real? All three of these responses are all based in fear. All of them. They're all based in fear. Not a healthy fear of the Lord, but a fear of God's going to hurt me, God's going to hit me. Like, just think about it for a second. Pretend you ticked off some tyrannical dictator, you know? And so, you know, whatever, you're in North Korea and you're trying to flee from Kim Jong, you know? And so if you knew that a dictator was after you because you wronged, quote unquote, wronged the dictator, what would you do? Well, the first thing you would do is you would run away. You'd hide. I hope he doesn't find me. I hope he doesn't find me. And let's say he catches you. Then what's the next thing you do? Well, you start lying. And you say, well, I only did it because and you start justify. And then, let's say that doesn't work, and he goes to punish you. What's the last thing you do? You'd fall on the ground and say, I'm sorry. I'll never do it again. I'm sorry. And that's exactly how we interact with God. We interact with him like he's some kind of tyrannical dictator. Do you guys realize, I struggled with this for a long time. When I would fall into sin, I would fall on the ground before God, quote unquote. I'm sorry. I'll never do it again. I'll never do it. And I didn't realize I was compensating still. I thought God would be so pleased with me beating myself up. I thought he was impressed with that. That somehow me falling on my face, being afraid of God, was going to make up for the thing that I had actually done. We're all afraid. And we're having fear-based responses, which is why, do you know the number one command in the Bible is do not fear? Over and over and over, do not fear. Now it's interesting, when you read all the times the Bible says do not fear, the stories before Jesus give a certain justification for it. So if you read Joshua or whatever, the stories before Jesus, they almost always say, do not fear because the Lord is with you, right? So they're always saying, God's not like that. He's a loving Father, God is with you. That's the reason. But when Jesus comes, and when Jesus comes to earth, and when he dies on the cross, and when he resurrects, the reasoning for why we're not supposed to be afraid expands. Do not fear, not just because God is with you. If you read all the verses in the New Testament, do not fear. Why? Because Jesus Christ has overcome. Because Jesus Christ has overcome. Listen to me. Every time I try and run from God, I try and do life on my own, I try to impress God, I become insecure, I try and compensate, I try and take responsibility off myself. Every time I fall into sin, anytime that happens, it's always for the same reason. I have forgotten the gospel or the message of Jesus. And if I knew and if I trusted the gospel and the message of Jesus, I wouldn't have fallen into that thing to begin with. Can I, I know there's a lot of us in this room that probably don't even know the message of Jesus. And then others of us, we've forgotten it. Can I just remind us what the gospel message of Jesus is? There's 3 parts to it. Number 1, I have a God who loves me. God is not out to get me. He's here to save me. God is not out to condemn me. He's here to rescue me. He's not here to heap burdens onto me. He's here to lift them. I have a God who loves me. And when God looks at me, he has love in his eyes, compassion in his heart, because I am supposed to be his kid. And there's many of us in this room that you don't have a relationship with God. And when God looks at you, there's love in his eyes and compassion in his heart. And he's also heartbroken, because God is fundamentally a father who just wants his kids back. That's number 1. Number 2, Jesus died on the cross to forgive me. The whole reason Jesus came to earth to begin with is because I messed up. When I messed up, God wasn't like, I had no idea that was going to happen. No. I am so broken, and I am so evil to my core, even if I'm in complete denial about it, which most of us are. I'm so broken that Jesus on the cross is actually the payment and the penalty that I deserve. Just imagine for a second. Just imagine that a murderer, just imagine the worst crimes you could admit. So this absolute murderer, serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer energy, just imagine a murderer and someone that deserves the Congressional Medal of Honor. Imagine these 2 people both walk up to a judge. And this judge pulls out both the records of everything that they had done. And first he looks at the guy who deserves the Congressional Medal of Honor, and he reads through his profile. And he goes, man, you have given your life for other people. You have rescued other people. You have been brave and selfless and bold. You have done everything right. And he pulls out the medal, and he puts it around his neck and says, you are a hero. You are a hero. But then he looks at the murderer, and he reads through his file, and the judge gets a little choked up, and he says, listen, man, according to everything you've done and according to our law, you deserve capital punishment for your crimes. You have lived an absolutely evil life. I have no choice as a judge but then to let you face the penalty for the thing that you deserve. And imagine this murderer gets all worked up and he starts crying because he knows what he did. And imagine the guy next to him who had just won the Congressional Medal of Honor. And the guy looks and says, no, Judge, here's what I want you to do. I want you to swap our records. I want you to swap our records. And he takes off the Medal of Honor and he puts it onto the murderer and says, Judge, I want you to treat this murderer as if he's done everything that I've ever done. as if he deserves. I want you to celebrate him. I want him to be on the news. I want everyone to know the incredible thing, the incredible person that he is. And the judge says, but what about his record? And the guy who won the medal originally says, let me take it. And so he takes capital punishment, the thing that he deserves. Listen to me, listen to me. What is Jesus on the cross? Jesus on the cross is what I deserve. That's how I'm forgiven. But I'm not just forgiven. Jesus takes his reward. He takes his medal of honor. He takes it off and he puts it around my neck. And that's how I get to be called a son of God. Why? Because Jesus is the Son of God. And that's how I get to be called perfect. Why? Because Jesus was perfect. And that's how I get to be called holy. Why? Because Jesus is holy. And every mistake that I've ever made has been paid for by Jesus Christ. The past mistakes, the present mistakes, and the future ones. If I go out and I do something crazy, well, guess what? When Jesus died on the cross, he anticipated that action. Our record has been swapped, which means number 3, and this is very important, I am not defined by my mistakes or my own life anymore. I am defined by Jesus' life. I'm not defined by the good things I've done or the bad things I've done. That record, I'm not even holding that record. I am defined by what Jesus Christ has done. And what did I do to deserve any of that reward? Absolutely nothing. And if I understand this, if I understand that I'm not going to run from God, I'm going to walk up to God with confidence. Why? Because I know that no matter how I messed up, God sees me as perfect. I got that medal of honor around my neck 24/7, no matter what crazy crap I get into. That's what it means to follow Jesus. I gotta be honest right now. I'm in a season right now where believing this has been incredibly difficult. There's nothing particularly crazy going on. I don't know what it is. Like, my heart is having the hardest time accepting it. I told you about the thing on Wednesday, but really there's just been a series of things where God has been revealing to me my own sin that I was in total denial of. And my instinct has been to hide and deny and perform and all this kind of stuff. And just this last Thursday night, I got home to my house and I just started weeping. Because God kind of lifted the veil and let me know a little bit what I deserved, but he didn't do it in a mean way or an angry way. He lifted the veil to show me what I deserved so he could show me how much he loves me. I said, Josiah, buddy, you are trying to do it on your own, man. I'm here to do this with you. Stop performing. Stop trying to compensate. Come to me instead. And I think there's a lot of us in the same boat. There's some of us right now who are afraid of God. There's some of us right now who are running from God. There are many of us right now who have never really had a relationship with God. And there are many of us in this room who have had a relationship with God for a very long time, but there's no passion. And it's all stale. And there's no confidence. And you're more upset about how work is going or your family is going or who got elected or what. You're more upset about that kind of thing because your strength doesn't come from Jesus Christ, even though you are saved. And so I want to invite us into something right now to end out our service. I'm going to invite the band up. Here's what I want us to do. I want us to pray the gospel. I want us to pray the gospel. And here's what I mean. Raise your hand if you've ever messed up in your life. Okay, raise your hand if you are going to mess up in your life. Okay, this is everybody. All right, listen. When you mess up, or the doubt creeps in, or the failure creeps in, this has become my new routine. And this is how I'm trying to understand my relationship with God. My new routine is, God, I know I did this thing, but I know you still love me. And nothing I can do will make you love me any more. Nothing I can do will make you love me any less. Your love for me is exactly the same because you are not out to get me. You are my dad. Second, God, I know I did this thing, but I am already forgiven for that. I'm already forgiven. And if I fail again and again and again and again and again, because that medal of honor, I am already forgiven, which means lastly, God, I am not defined by this at all. But listen, if I'm not going to be defined by my failures, I can't be defined by my successes either. I'm not defined by any of this. I'm defined by what Jesus did when he died on the cross and when he resurrected. Some of us have that relationship, others of us don't. And so what I'm going to do to end our time right now, I want everybody to just take a couple moments, and whatever your struggle is, whatever the thing that's on your mind, whatever the thing that's functionally defining you, I want you to go to God and pray that thing through the gospel. Yes, this, but also. Yes, this, but also. Yes, this, but also. And then my prayer lately has been, God, I believe this, but I don't really believe this. Will you help my unbelief? So I'm going to kick us off in prayer. The band's going to get settled in. You spend your time with God, a couple minutes, and then the band's going to lead us into a time of prayer through the songs. And everyone hopefully will be able to connect with God together. Jesus, thank you so much that we don't have to be afraid of you, that we don't have to run from you at all. Lord, I just pray that you would speak to each of us. God, you would let us stop filtering our words, filtering our thoughts, instead just be 100% honest with you. You already know what's in our hearts anyways. Jesus, I pray that right now we can be honest, but that you would speak to us. God, I pray for all of us in this room who do not have a relationship with you. Will you reveal yourself to us? Show us your heart. Show us who you are, Lord.
Silence steals my voice. You understand me. You understand me. Come to me in the valley of unknowns. You understand me. You understand me. You understand me. Understand me. So I throw all my cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought. So I stop all negotiations with the God of all creation. You're bigger than I thought you were. Bigger than I thought you were. together as we pray. So I throw all my cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought. So I stop all negotiations with the God of all creation. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought you I will rest in the Father's hands. Leave the rest in the Father's hands. I will rest in the Father's hands. Leave the rest in the Father's hands. God, we are try to be as honest with you as we possibly can. God, knowing that you are a good God, a faithful Father, that your loving kindness will meet us every time. So God, I just pray that you give us courage. You just give us that kind of simple trust in you. To know as we open ourselves up to you and to your change in our lives, to your direction, to your grace, that you can continue to just teach us what it is to walk with you, and that our life will be just transformed moment by moment by your presence in our lives, knowing that there is already nothing in our life that is hidden from you, and that there's nothing good that comes from hiding from you, or trying to hide or pretending that we're hiding. So God, teach us that simple thing, to just trust you. Trust your guidance, trust your voice, trust your instruction, your correction, knowing that you are God, and that in you is great peace, purpose, a future. Lord, thanks for inviting us into that relationship and providing every way for us to know you. It's in your name, Jesus, that we pray. Amen.
Could it really be this easy? That you love me like you say you do? I got years and years of striving. There's nothing left to prove. Could it really be this simple? Kindness changes everything. It's like your grace is on a mission to tear down my religion. You're all I really need. Hallelujah. All this time, how you love me. How you love me. Hallelujah. It blows my mind.
thank you guys so much for being here this weekend with us, spending this time of worship together. Enjoy your evening, and we'll see you real soon. Peace.